Almost had my first blunder of the semester. The way this class is structured is it is a blended class. It is high flex or highly flexible. What that means is that there is a lecture, which I do on campus, and the rest of the material is covered online. So it's sort of a blend between an in-person class and an online class. Now, as far as the lecture goes, you have three options for watching the lecture. One of them is to come into campus, into BU 103, Tuesday at 9 a.m. and see the lecture in person. So that's one of your options. A second option is to watch it synchronously via WebEx. In other words, log into my WebEx room, 9 a.m. on Tuesdays, and you'll be able to watch the lecture live. A third option is to watch the recording of the lecture. And the recording is typically available within an hour of the end of class, so I would expect by 11 a.m. in most cases. If it's not there, definitely by, say, the end of the afternoon, it will be there if there's some reason that I can't get to it. But I like to post it immediately when the class is finished, so within an hour of the lecture being finished, most of the time the lecture will be available. Now you have the option, or you have that option between those three possibilities for every class. In other words, you don't have to decide on one and always do it. You can mix and match. So therefore, you could attend in person some of the time, you could watch synchronously via WebEx some of the time, or you could watch the recording some of the time. The idea is that it accommodates any sort of personal responsibilities or other school responsibilities that you have. So, and I'll give you reasons why you might want to do one versus the other. You might want to show up in person, possibly if you're having difficulty with the material, or if you're the kind of person that responds better face-to-face and in person. I found that typically when students have difficulty with the material, if they actually show up to class instead of watching the recording or watching it synchronously, sometimes that gets a better connection with them and they can get through the problems that they're having. So that's the advantage of showing up in class. So you also have the advantage if you show up in class that you can ask questions and get them answered immediately. So if there's something I say that you don't understand, you can just raise your hand, ask the question, and I'll answer it immediately. The other option, the second option, if you watch it synchronously online, is that you can still ask questions. You can do a couple of things. You can put the questions in the chat. You can turn on your microphone and just begin speaking. You can hit the raise hand icon and so forth. If I don't notice immediately, give it a second shot, because depending on the class, I might be looking, my eyes might be focused in a different direction. I might not be able to see that, but just give a second chance for me to be able to go in and ask questions. So it offers the advantage to that, and it offers the advantage that you don't have to make the trip onto campus. For example, if the weather was bad and you didn't feel like driving through the snow on a particular day, or if you have the flu or something and you don't want to come in and be contagious to other people, you can take it, watch it synchronously online. Third option is to watch the videos later on. What class are you looking for? E103?
Yes.
Okay, this is a business building. E building is that way.
I'm sorry, it says section P, but B, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
Watching the lecture recording afterwards, again, offers you the ultimate flexibility in when you watch it. If you switch jobs and you know, your shift is different and you're unable to attend the class or watch it synchronously, you can always watch the video whenever you want to at your convenience. You can still ask questions, but you won't be asking them in real time. In other words, I encourage you, anyone that's watching the video, if you have questions about what I'm speaking about, to send me an email, and I'll do my best to answer them to the best of my ability. The lab session for this class is identical to the lecture. In other words, you can show up in person and work on your lab assignments. You can connect via WebEx during the time and ask me questions about your lab assignments, or you can asynchronously email me questions about your project that you're working on. If you email me, I ask for a few things that's highlighted over here on the syllabus. Zip up all your files and attach in the message. All right. So send everything, send your images, send CSS, send all your HTML pages, and so on. Give a complete and specific description of your issue. In other words, don't just tell me that it doesn't work. You know, my job isn't that of a detective where I have to figure out what you're trying to say. If the image doesn't change when you mouse over the image, say the image doesn't change when I mouse over the image. And you can include screen captures if that will help explain the issue. Do not upload the assignment unless it's ready to be graded. All right, that's a big one. In other words, if you have an assignment that you know is not correct and you're going to ask me about it, send it to me via email, via Canvas email. Do not upload it to the Dropbox and say, hey, I'm having problems with this, that, or the other. All right. Reason for that is I grade typically, I go through all the assignments and grade typically once a week. I answer my email typically daily. So you'll get a much quicker answer if you do that. Plus, I don't want the Dropbox cluttered by incomplete work. I would rather you wait to get an answer and turn things in a day or two late and have it right than to turn something in just so that you can turn something in by the deadline. I know you all can turn something in by the deadline. The point is I want you to turn in something that's correct. All right. So immediately after this class, I will go to BU 210. And I will be also available in the same WebEx room. And you can work on your stuff. If you have questions, you can connect with me. If you're there in person, if you have questions, you can ask me. If you skip out on the lab altogether, if you run into questions doing the assignment or with anything else, you can email them to me. As far as late assignments go, I am typically very flexible about late assignments, provided you have kept me in the loop. What do I mean by that? I mean, like, let's say, for example, you're having trouble with an assignment and, you know, let's say an assignment is due Wednesday and you email me something Tuesday and say, I'm trying to get the assignment done. I've run into these problems. I might respond with an email. You might not exactly understand what I'm saying, or you might understand part of what I'm saying and not understand another part or whatever. Make some changes, email me the new version, and so on. And that can go through a couple of rounds, all right? If that causes you to be a few days late on the assignment, that's okay with me, and I won't deduct any points. Or if you are ill and you're not able to work on homework, and so you're going to be a few days late, just shoot me an email saying, look, I'm ill. I'm going to turn this in a couple days late. Is that okay? And I'll say yes. If you have a personal problem, you don't have to go into details about the personal problem. I don't need to know anything that you don't want to divulge to me. So if you're having a personal problem and you can't get something turned in by the deadline, just tell me I got a personal problem and I won't be able to turn this in by the deadline, and you'll be fine. When I do penalize for late assignments is typically because students disappear on me. They don't ask questions. They don't tell me that there's any issues or whatever. They just don't turn in the work, and 2-3 weeks later, they turn something in, or even longer than that, believe it or not. If that happens, well, then I reserve the right to deduct. I mean, I'm trying to meet you halfway. You have to meet me the other halfway. All right. Now, if you're late for an assignment, that's no big deal. If you become habitually late with assignments, though, that's the sign that something has to change, because you can't continue that for the rest of the semester, because you'll get to the end of the semester and not be able to turn everything in, right? Because I can be flexible throughout the semester. I can't be very flexible at the end of the semester unless there's some really huge issue, like you were hospitalized for a couple weeks or whatever. Therefore, if you're habitually late, take that as a sign that something changes. What do I mean by something changes? Well, maybe you consider coming into class instead of watching the lectures or watching the recorded lectures. Maybe you need to devote more time to this. Maybe you need to review the resources that are online more thoroughly. Maybe you need to email me and ask for extra assistance. The point is if you're turning things in on time and you're getting full credit, you know you're on track. You don't have to worry about that. If you're not, then again, if that happens once or so, that's not a big deal. If that continues to happen, then you need to take some action, and the best thing to do would be to contact me and we can discuss that. I've had students have all kinds of problems, and we've been able to work something out where I give them assistance a couple times a week or once a week outside of class or whatever. That's the other thing I want to emphasize. These are all my office hours. So not just our ordinary lab time, but all these times you are able to come to the designated lab, or you can dial in via WebEx. All right. I make all my labs available to any of my students. And that has not posed a problem in the past of there being, a line of students and I can't get to everyone. On occasion, if I'm helping another student, you might have to wait a couple minutes for me to get around to helping you. But this gives you even more opportunity. And again, if none of these work for you, contact me and give me a list of times when you're available. And I'm sure I'll be able to accommodate you one way or another. Please review the rest of the syllabus and periodically review Canvas for any announcements, changes, corrections, whatever. Are there any questions at this point? All right. Let's look at the title of this class and talk about what it means and give an overview of the technologies that we're going to cover in this class. So bring up trusty old MS Paint and draw. What happens when you ask for a web page? All right. For example, if I go, and I use this a lot because usually it's not a very controversial page, so we don't have to worry about that kind of issue. If I go to ESPN.com, so I type in the URL and I hit return. What happens? Well, we're going to talk about that. Notice that I can do this. If I put my mouse over one of these topics in the menu, I get a little pop-up menu. So notice that. Or Google, be another example. Notice how as I type things in, if I type in H, it shows me Home Depot, Hurricane, Huntington Bank, Hotmail, Hulu, and so on. If I type in HT, it shows me HTML, HTS code, HTTP error, and so on. So the longer I type, the more that it pulls in. So keep those two things in the back of your mind. The fact that I requested 2 web pages, I got a response, then I did something on the web page, and the web page changed. Maybe not drastically, it didn't completely change, but part of the web page changed. So keep that in the back of your mind, because that's important. So what happens when we request a page? You are the client in this case, or I was the client in this case. It's probably best to think of specifically my computer as being the client. Now, there's all kinds of clients that you could have. You could have a client that is a mobile device, a client being a game console to connect to the internet, a client being a web crawler that searches for new pages and indexes them, like whatever magic Google performs in order to index the sites that it indexes. So you are the client. You are connected to the internet, which is drawn like a cloud, because again, that's sort of a buzzword these days, cloud computing and things being stored out in the cloud. But we're going to consider the internet a cloud because we're not really worried about what happens in there. We just trust that this part of the process works. So really, when we make a request, and we make a request by clicking on a link or typing in a URL, we make a request. That goes to the internet and gets routed to a web server. All right. So I type in www.google.com. My request goes to the internet, and that involves a lot of things. The URL that I've typed in gets translated to an IP address. All right, an IP address is like the numerical address of every computer on the web. So my request might then go through a route of different computers, part of the internet chain, because not every computer is connected to every computer, right? We don't have a direct line to Google. You know, we go through different hubs of the internet to finally get to the server. It's like an airplane, right? Flights from Cleveland Hopkins Airport don't go everywhere in the country. They go to the different hubs, and then the hubs take you to your final destination. So similar to that in the case of the internet, you get routed along a path that eventually ends up at your server. A client makes requests, a server responds to requests. Okay? And that response goes back to the client. All right? And that response can contain a few main things and some other things, but mainly HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is different than Java. That's a confusion that some students have. Some students simply refer to, well, my Java code on this web page doesn't work. Usually they mean their JavaScript code doesn't work. All right. That gets sent back to the client. And the client uses that, the client's browser uses that to display a web page. The HTML is the content of the web page. So if we go to ESPN.com, there are all the scores, all the articles, the navigation, all that is contained in the HTML of the page. The CSS is the formatting of the page, right? These are the things that we covered to a big degree in CISS232. The CSS is the appearance of the page and the physical layout. Then we get the JavaScript. And JavaScript is sort of the third part of the client triangle, which I'll draw in a minute here. All right. And JavaScript relates to the behavior of a page. So, for example, we go to lc.com, we put our mouse over that, we get a pull-down menu. This happens without making a new request. How do I know that? I know that because it happens immediately. I don't see the status on the bottom flicker at all, like when I refresh the page or click a link. Well, I didn't see a flicker there either, but again, it happens immediately. This is one advantage back when the internet used to be slow. Some of these things were more obvious to see. Here you kind of have to take my word that no request was made back to the server. Because there doesn't need to be a request made back to the server. Because the JavaScript to do that behavior, which is what JavaScript controls, was sent along with the original web page. So when we request this page by typing in the URL or clicking a link or whatever, we get the HTML that contains all this stuff, contains these images, contains this logo, contains these links, contains these little stories, contains these articles, and so on. We get all that HTML. We get the CSS that says, put this at the top of the page, make this blue, make the background of these things blue. Put a line under this. Make these gold, the text gold and the background blue, and so on. That's the CSS that gets back. The JavaScript handles the behavior. That says when I put my mouse over this getting started link, this appears. When I take my mouse off of that and put it on something else, the first submenu disappears and the second submenu appears. And so on down the line. That is JavaScript. Now, there's a very special case of using JavaScript along with an additional request to the server that's called AJAX. And we cover that towards the end of the semester. I do want to introduce that to you now. And that's exactly what happens on Google's page. When we type something in here, and we get these selections. If you think about it, the web server couldn't have possibly sent to the client all the things that you could search for. So therefore, there's an initial request that loads this initial page. Whenever I type something in, another mini request is made that doesn't get a complete web page. I'll label these with A. B is an AJAX request, and we get back a piece of data. So an AJAX request goes to the server just like a regular request does. The server responds just like it normally does, but the response comes back in the form of a piece of data that the client's JavaScript incorporates into the original web page. So as I type in something here, all right, if I type something in there, there's some mini requests being done, and the JavaScript is going to change the original web page. This is where we're going to start out this class, by considering client-side JavaScript. I do want to introduce to you a little bit about the way that web servers provide a response. We'll do that now, and we'll come back to that later on in the semester. Now, if you notice, the HTML pages, the web pages that we developed in CISS232 are what are called static pages. Static pages simply mean unchanging pages. If you were to go and open your lab 5 in CISS232, it would look identical to the way it looked the day that you turned it in. Nothing changed. The server's job is easy for static HTML page. If you request a page, the server simply finds a page and delivers it. All right. Dynamic pages, though, are more about what the internet's really like. For example, Canvas. We both go to the same page in Canvas, yet my screen looks very different than your screen. Why is that? Because I supply my credentials, my user ID and password. You supply your credentials. There's some sort of database lookup that happens, and the page is constructed specifically for whoever logs on. So you're not going to see all of my classes. I'm not going to see all of your classes. I'm going to see all of my classes. You're going to see all of your classes. Yet we go to the same page. How does that magic happen? Through dynamic pages, which involves server-side scripting. In these, we don't write completed HTML, we write scripts. That the server processes and generates HTML. And might involve connecting to a database. So it's kind of the whole picture. Now, I mentioned something about a client-side triangle. What I mean by that is HTML is the content. CSS is the appearance. JavaScript is the behavior. CSS is used to format HTML. This is the content. CSS formats it. JavaScript can be used to change the content or change the appearance. So in the case of LC's webpage or of ESPN's webpage, those menus are here all along. I just make them visible or invisible. So I'm changing the appearance of part of the page. Okay, what we're going to do now for the remainder of class is talk a little bit about, in very general terms, how JavaScript works, and we're going to build an example. And we're going to try to emulate this functionality of putting your mouse over something and making a submenu appear. I sort of have the start of that code online. And we're going to build on this very simple example to make it more thorough and more comprehensive. So I have this page here. And I have this link. When I put my mouse over it, that appears. I take my mouse out and it still stays there. Well, that's not exactly the behavior that we get on ESPN or LC's website. We should have it when we take our mouse out, we make it disappear, but we'll get to that. In addition, this shouldn't just be a message saying, here's my submenu, there should be actual links in there. And we'll get to that. Whether we get to that today or next time, we'll see. But let's look at what we have here, the very basics of what we have here. Because I want to go through sort of the formula for the way JavaScript works. I'm going to use throughout this class Visual Studio Code, which is a nice editor for any kind of programming that you have. As we watch this, let's look at where all the code appears. In other words, what part of this equation is done in HTML, what part is done in CSS, one part is done in JavaScript. Well, notice I have a very simple thing. I have a link and a div. And the div, so this is the content of the page. My link, my main menu item, and then my submenu item, which is just represented by this div right now. That's the content of the page. What about the appearance of the page? Well, the appearance of the page is controlled by the style tag, which makes this div effectively invisible. I say display none, which simply says don't display that piece of content. I then, on the link, I have some JavaScript that actually changes the style of the thing on the page. So content in HTML, appearance in CSS, behavior in JavaScript. What does that JavaScript do? Well, first of all, we have an event. All right, an event is something that, some action that can happen on the page. And oftentimes it's a user action. All right. And in this case, on mouse over is the user action. So when the user puts their mouse over this link, this snippet of JavaScript gets initiated. So that's sort of the first part of the recipe. An event occurs. Second part of this. And again, this is just a very general overview. We'll see simpler and probably won't see simpler examples, but we'll see more involved examples of this. The second thing is that we point to something on the page using the DOM. What do I mean by the DOM? The DOM, the abbreviation DOM, means Document Object Model. Document Object Model is a way to refer to everything that's part of a web page. So we can point to everything on the web page by using a DOM expression. And we'll look at that in more detail in a minute here. The final thing we do is we change something either the content or appearance. Now again, this is the sort of the flow for a lot of JavaScript, not necessarily every single piece of JavaScript that you'll see. An event occurs, we find the thing on the page that we want to change, and then we change it. So let's look at this document object model expression. Notice, first of all, that it is enclosed in quotes, double quotes. And within the expression, we use single quotes. You have to use the two different kinds of quotes. If I were to use the double quotes here, the browser would think that that was the end of the expression and it would give me an error. So therefore, within the double quotes, I use single quotes. That way, the browser keeps straight that this is the whole expression. This is a value. This is a value. What we're actually doing with this DOM expression is we're zeroing in on the thing that we want to change. So the word document right there means something on the web page we want to change. We're looking for something on the web page. All right. We don't have to be looking for something on the web page, but we are in this case. Get element by ID means find the thing on the page that has this ID. So an ID, remember, needs to be unique. So this expression should only point to one element on the page. There should not be two elements called submenu. Two elements named submenu, meaning two elements with the same ID named submenu. So this should only point to one thing. These IDs need to be unique. If I had more than one submenu, I'd have to call them submenu 1, submenu 2, so forth. Or possibly take another strategy. But we'll just say in this case, I would have submenu 1, submenu 2. So I pointed to this on the page, this element, this thing that has an ID of submenu. What are we going to change about it? We're going to change something about the style. What about the style? We're going to change the display property. The exact thing that we set in the CSS. And what are we going to change it to? We're going to change it to block. And that's enclosed in single quotes because that is a literal. In other words, this isn't the value of a variable or something. This is literally the word block. Without quotes, typically we're referring to a variable and its value. With quotes, we're talking about a literal. In other words, we want that exact value. So document, get element by ID, style, display, block. So we're zeroing in on what we want to change. First thing we say is it's somewhere on the web page. Second thing we say is it's the element that has the ID of this. Third thing we want to do is we want to change the style of this. What about the style we want to change? We want to just change the display property. And what do we want to change that to? We want to change that to block. Now there's a bunch of events that we could have. Just like there's an on mouse over, there's an on mouse out. And I could change this to, in addition to displaying it when I mouse over, do something different when the mouse goes out. In other words, what I probably want to do is I want to find that thing on the document as an ID of submenu. I'll change the style of it. I want to change the display attribute of the style, and I want to change that back to none. I think I typoed. Maybe not. So now, it appears, it disappears. Now we have a problem. If this was actually a submenu, I try to put my mouse on it, it disappears because I have not put any code in for what happens when the mouse is on the submenu. That unfortunately we don't have enough time to do. Are there any questions at this point? What I want to do before we break today is look at the first homework assignment and make sure that you understand it. First homework assignment. Again, which is in the module. All these materials covers what we talked about today. Gives an introduction to JavaScript and some tutorials that you should go over. I want you to create a web page. So you only need to create a single web page with an overview of the main topics of this course: JavaScript, PHP, and Ajax. So you need to look those up and get some definitions, find some resources about them, just gather some information. Then you're going to create a web page that contains a description of that topic, like a definition, examples, and so on, and some links to pages that cover it. So your page will have 3 sections: a JavaScript section, a PHP section, and an Ajax section. And each one will contain a description of that technology and some websites about that technology. Make the page look professional. All right, I can't emphasize enough. My examples that I give in class are bare bones, simply because of the element of time and because I don't want to cloud the issue by having a lot of superfluous stuff on my web page. So I will do very, very, very simple examples. You, on the other hand, should make your pages look complete. This is a chance for you to practice what you've learned in CISS232 and to develop really good pages with good, solid CSS and HTML. Now, you only need to develop one page, and that one page will contain all 3 topics. You do not need to include any JavaScript on this page. This is just sort of an overview of the class. We're not getting into JavaScript in this particular assignment. This is sort of an icebreaker to get you used to making HTML pages again and give you a little bit more information and background about these 3 technologies. Are there any questions? Okay.
I have a
We will see.
Professor Zellers.
we'll
I
see you-
I
Oh,
have a
you do have a
question.
question. Go
I
ahead.
do, sorry. So, so just a couple of quick
Either
questions.
turn your mic on or you can type it in chat.
Oh, can you not hear me? I don't know why it's not working. Okay. I don't know why my speaker's not working.
Yeah, I'm not hearing you.
Okay, I'll type it in the chat. Let's see, where's the chat? Where's the chat? Oh, there it is. So,
Can we use Bootstrap? Yeah, why not? We'll
okay.
cover it later on in the semester. We'll cover Bootstrap, but if it's something you already know and you want to practice, sure. As a general rule, you can always do more than the assignment requires. And I'm trying to read this. Does everything need to be above the fold? No.
Okay.
Just make it look professional. You know, make it look good. And again, if there's enough, yeah, you don't need to worry about that. Any other questions?
Does this work now?
Yeah, I'm not sure why I can't hear you.
Oh, you still can't
and
hear
I'll
me?
have them look into it to see if there's a setting or what. If you want to experiment with this, you can contact me during lab today. I'll be on my laptop, and I know the audio works on my laptop. So if I can't hear you on my laptop, then there might be an issue with the setup on your end. If I can hear you on the laptop, then I know the issue is on my end. All right, we'll see you over in lab then. Have a good weekend. See you next time.